Hi, my name is Robert Church. I'm an attorney. I practice law in Maryland, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. Back in 1996, I became involved with a lawsuit with an old friend of mine, James Damiano. I assisted him with an appeal filed in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. The case involved James Damiano versus Bob Dylan. I knew about this case because I worked with James back in 1989, 1990. I had played guitar for some 20 years, and we got together in my apartment and we started playing some of his material. I remember hearing the song Steel Guitars, and we played around with it. Jim played it he has a recording that was involved in this lawsuit where he plays in the key of G. I do recall in my apartment where I thought that the song would be easier to play in the key of E. It's a favorite chord for guitar players. We just played solos. And the song did not have lyrics or hook, but we played a lot around with it. In 1994, I was working for a judge after graduating from law school, and I heard the song Dignity. Now, Jim and I had talked for a number of years about his experience with CBS Records. He had submitted material to CBS Records for a number of years. When I met Jim at the Town & Country Ford dealership in Charlotte, North Carolina, I looked at his lyrics and I saw that this guy has talent. I thought his lyrics were very good, and they had potential. He also showed me the backstage pass that he had with Bob Dylan, and there were times that we had discussed whether or not there was a potential lawsuit against Bob Dylan for use of his lyrics. Jim had contacted me when I was working for a judge after he was retained by an attorney. He retained an attorney services to file a lawsuit in the District Court of New Jersey. The attorney who he hired was a famous litigator. I was very impressed with the attorney's work and happy to see that Jim had finally found good counsel to represent him. I didn't know a whole lot about Steve Kramer, but that became a big topic of discussion. In any event, Steve Kramer handled the case in the district court, and the district court judge dismissed the case in summary judgment. Now, summary judgment is something that is a term of law that was at issue in the appeal that I filed in the Court of Appeals. Summary judgment is where a judge dismisses a lawsuit on the basis of there being no dispute of material fact, and the judge can dismiss the case as a matter of law. The problem is, in this particular case, there was two versions of the song Steel Guitars. There was one that was registered in the U.S. Copyright Office, and there was one that was not registered in the U.S. Copyright Office. When Steve Kramer filed the lawsuit for James Damiano, the registrations were a little confused. He had an expert witness analyze one of the versions of the Steel Guitar song and found a substantial similarity between that song and Dylan's song. But another version of the song was not registered for copyright. The expert analyzed the version that was not registered for copyright. On summary judgment in the U.S. District Court, the judge said that the version of the tape that was not registered for copyright that the expert listened to could not serve as a basis of a lawsuit in federal court because it was not registered for copyright. The judge listened to the song that was registered for copyright that the expert did not analyze, and the judge said, since there's no expert analysis on this particular tape, I'm going to listen to it and apply an opinion as to whether or not the song is similar to Bob Dylan's song Dignity. The judge dismissed the case on summary judgment because he did not think that the two songs were similar. I took the appeal. I was not admitted in the Third Circuit at the time, or the U.S. District Court of New Jersey. I was admitted in the U.S. District Court of Maryland. But I became admitted in the U.S. District Court, in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, not in the U.S. District Court. Steve Kramer, after the case was dismissed on summary judgment, was suspended from practicing law in the state of New Jersey. And due to his suspension, he could not represent Mr. Damiano in the Third Circuit. I became admitted in the Third Circuit, and then I could take the appeal. My argument was that the question as to whether two songs are similar, Dignity or Steel Guitars, that question is a question for the jury. And that's a question of fact. It's not an issue of law. The issues of law in a copyright infringement case are, number one, whether or not the defendant had access to the plaintiff's material. That was established in the judge's opinion to be a question of fact. James had argued that he did give Bob Dylan his material at a concert years before, and the judge found that there was dispute of fact on that. The second question on a matter of law is whether there's a substantial similarity between the two songs. So these are two issues of law that the judge has to decide on summary judgment. Those two issues are, number one, again, whether or not the defendant had access to the plaintiff's material, and number two, whether there's a substantial similarity between the two songs. Those are the two elements of a copyright infringement claim. There was a dispute of fact as to whether James gave Bob Dylan his lyrics or whether Dylan had access to his lyrics. The judge found that there was a dispute of fact, meaning a jury can hear the evidence, hear Jim's version of the story and then Bob Dylan's version of the story, and decide which version is more credible, which version do they believe, and decide, number one, whether he did in fact have access to the material. The second issue is whether there's substantial similarity. Now, when I took this appeal in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which is in New York, had decided that when you have an expert witness say that there's a substantial similarity between two songs, as a matter of law, the judge is required to allow that issue to go to the jury. That's in New York. This case is in New Jersey. In the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, that was not established. So, my argument on appeal is that the question whether or not the two songs are similar is a question a jury should decide and not a judge. The judge did have precedent for going ahead and listening to the songs and dismissing the case. That had been done in other cases. I felt the Third Circuit would reverse the judge on that. However, in this particular case, after the case was dismissed in the district court, the judge granted an extension of time for Steve Kramer to file a motion to reconsider his opinion. Mr. Kramer did file that motion to reconsider the case, and the judge granted that extension of time, but the judge denied the motion to reconsider, and then the appeal was filed. Well, the judge's extension of time, when I took the appeal and filed it in the Third Circuit decided that that extension of time took jurisdiction away from the Third Circuit Court of Appeals to decide the case. So they dismissed the case without deciding on the merits whether the judge's opinion was right. The Third Circuit dismissed the case based upon the fact that it did not have jurisdiction to file the appeal, to hear the appeal. So there's nothing that could be done about that. That was my involvement of the case. And there is a potential argument to be made that the version of steel guitars that was not registered for copyright at the time that this lawsuit was filed, that version could still serve as the basis of a new copyright infringement lawsuit. However, I have not agreed to take that case. It would be very expensive litigation and a very difficult case. So that's how the case stands, and my name is Robert Church. I was the attorney who represented James Damiano in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit. Thank you.